states. However, they showed only 0.5% of the support. You can see the percentage over there. Korea is showed only 54% and Japan showed about 62%. It was a lot lower than Iran. Iran showed the highest support for the nuclear disarmament resolutions. Okay, the implications for nuclear weapon-free Northeast Asia, nuclear umbrella, and nuclear disarmament. Okay, then we should ask the South Korean government and Japanese government, would they support for nuclear weapon-free Northeast Asia? And then what has to be done to achieve nuclear weapon-free Northeast Asia? Firstly, the South Korean and Japanese government should stop accusing North Korea of delaying the six-party talks. Rather, all of the six-party countries are responsible for the delay of the six-party talks, and all of them should take initiatives to resume the six-party talks, including, of course, North Korea. Secondly, they should take an initiative to abandon the security policy, highly rely on the U.S. nuclear umbrella, simultaneously requesting North Korea to discard its nuclear weapons. Thirdly, South Korea and Japan are better to show strong support for universal nuclear disarmament, as well as North Korea's nuclear issues. They should present more active and affirmative initiative for universal nuclear disarmament. That is, South Korea and Japan are responsible for nuclear disarmament since they rely on nuclear umbrella from the U.S. Not only the nuclear weapon states are responsible for nuclear disarmament, and also those countries who rely on nuclear umbrella also responsible for nuclear disarmament. And then they should not exempt the U.S. from the nuclear disarmament obligation. They should show strong urge to U.S. Strongly urge the U.S. to process nuclear disarmament. They should diminish, and also the Japanese and South Korean government should diminish their role of the nuclear umbrella in their security policies. Okay, thank you for listening.
How long have you spent time to prepare this research?
Pretty long.
Pretty long.
Yeah, please look at the report for detailed information. Thank you.
Thank you for your efforts one more time. Yes. And our next speaker is Scott Bruce from Nautilus Institute. Please, Scott. Yes.
Right. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here today. I'm actually here on behalf of Yi Kiho, who is the director of Nautilus ARI. Mr. Kiho Yi could not be here today, and he asked me to come in his place, and I'm very honored to be here today with you. Nautilus ARI in South Korea, along with the Nautilus Institute in the United States and Australia, has been looking at the possibility of creating a Northeast Asia nuclear weapon-free zone. Please go to the next slide. Almost 2 decades after the end of the Cold War, people are becoming increasingly aware that nuclear weapons are a threat to security rather than a guarantor of peace. In Northeast Asia today, North Korea has withdrawn from the NPT for more than a decade. It's conducted 2 nuclear tests. This means that the 1992 Joint Korean Denuclearization Declaration is only being honored on half of the Korean peninsula. The six-party talks, which attempt to address this issue, have struggled to convene, let alone advance their agenda. In response to this, the United States has increased reliance on its extended nuclear deterrence system. This actually runs contrary to the goals of nuclear abolition, as it makes nuclear weapons a bigger part of U.S. defense policy rather than a smaller part. This means that nuclear weapons are on the march in Northeast Asia today. Next slide, please. A nuclear weapon-free zone in Northeast Asia would strengthen the nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament global norms. This would be the second multi-state nuclear weapon-free zone in the Northern Hemisphere. It would be the first to cover OECD countries, countries that have the funds and technology to go nuclear if they chose, unlike many parties to existing nuclear weapon-free zones. A Northeast Asia nuclear weapons-free zone would involve non-nuclear weapon states with active nuclear fuel cycles, surrounded by nuclear weapon states, freely overcoming their distrust of one another and declaring that they will never pursue their own nuclear programs, nor will they allow nuclear weapons to be located in or fired out of their territory. Next step, please. To develop this zone, however, requires a series of incremental steps. We can think of this as a stairway leading to a Northeast Asia nuclear weapon-free zone. Now, one might leap all the way to the top, or one might take several steps at once. But it is more likely that some steps will be taken first, some steps reserved till later, potentially even after the initial zone is created. Possibly the best first step would be for South Korea and Japan to commence discussions of the Northeast Asian nuclear weapon-free zone, wait for North Korea to disarm and join as a non-nuclear weapon state, and then secure security assurances from the nuclear powers in the region, the United States, Russia, and China. Next slide, please. However, it is likely that the denuclearization of North Korea is going to take some time. It needs security concerns and considerations, including the provision of security guarantees from the United States and other great powers in the region. Thus, a second sequence, back one, please. Back one more. There we are. Right, thank you. Thus, it might be productive as an interim step to create a zone of the two non-nuclear weapon states between South Korea and Japan. Have this be recognized by the three nuclear weapon states in the region, have them grant security guarantees to it, and then open the door for North Korea to join after that. So an interim step towards a Northeast Asia nuclear weapon-free zone could be a bilateral South Korea-Japan zone that paves the way for a Northeast Asia zone. Next slide, please. Now, it is actually possible that such an interim bilateral zone between South Korea and Japan could open the door for progress in the North Korean nuclear situation. Such a zone would create security guarantees from all the nuclear weapon states, including the United States, that would only be available to North Korea if it denuclearized and joined the zone. In particular, this is the only way that North Korea could get access to a monitoring and verification system ensuring the zone is nuclear-free. This is something North Korea has requested in both bilateral negotiations with the United States and in the six-party talks. In short, an interim South Korea-Japanese zone could create a series of incentives that would actually increase the likelihood of North Korea to denuclearize. Incentives that have been demanded as prerequisites by the North for it to surrender its own nuclear program. Next slide, please. I think this is also a particular opportunity when we think of the 2012 Nuclear Security Summit, which will be held in Seoul. Imagine what an opportunity it would be if South Korea and Japan could declare their intent to move towards this bilateral zone at the summit. Now, I know there is concern in South Korea and Japan about what moving towards a bilateral zone would mean if North Korea is not there contributing it to the start. I also know there is concern about what this would mean from North Korea's perspective if South Korea and Japan move towards a zone without the inclusion of the North. I think these are extremely important things that need to be addressed. My attention to sequencing is just attempting to look at what do we do if North Korea is not prepared to immediately disarm, or the United States and South Korea are not prepared to, or the United States and North Korea are not able to sync with one another and align on the steps that they would need to denuclearize North Korea in the short term. Do we put a Northeast Asian nuclear weapon-free zone on hold for 5 years, 10 years, longer than that, while we wait for the United States and North Korea to align? Or is there enough to take a preliminary step that could actually enable inclusion of North Korea in the future? Last slide, please. Finally, I want to leave by saying that a nuclear weapon-free zone in Northeast Asia is going to accomplish 5 very important things. First, this is going to reduce the nuclear threat in the region by inaugurating a nuclear weapon-free zone that will have security assurances from China, Russia, and the United States. Second, this is going to reaffirm the already existing commitments in Japan and South Korea to not develop their own nuclear weapons program. Third, This is going to create an institutional framework